what I would tend to tell any writer is, especially if you've got a poem that's 16 lines, try and get it into a sonnet. Why? A bit of pressure. Crunch that poem down. Where's it going to be weak and crumble in and become more dense in hopefully a positive way?
Welcome to The Glimpse. I'm your host, Hannah Lowe. Niall Campbell is a poet from the Outer Hebrides of Scotland. His first poetry collection, Moontide, won the Edwin Morgan Poetry Award and the Saltire First Book of the Year. Both Nocturne, his second collection, and Island in the Sound, his latest, were shortlisted for the Forward Prize. He works as a librettist and edits the acclaimed poetry journal, Poetry London. Niall Campbell is our guest today on The Glimpse. Niall Campbell's poems are elemental, musical and steeped in Scottish landscapes, carrying the textures of islands, weather and distance into the inner life. There is a quiet intensity to his work, a way of moving between solitude and connection, memory and presence, with a finely tuned ear for rhythm and tone. Niall's poems often feel like acts of listening, attentive to wind, sea and silence, to what is held in the land and what resists being known. These are poems that unfold with patience and care, full of atmosphere, longing and a sensitivity to place and perception. I'm so glad to have him here on The Glimpse with us. Niall, welcome.
Lovely to be here. Thanks very much for having me on.
I was reading earlier something about how after a collection you tend to have or take a fallow period, some time away from writing poetry, so much so that I think you said you have to relearn how to write a poem when you go back to writing. So I was wondering, are you in a fallow period now in terms of your own writing?
Deep in a fallow period, sadly. I think it's just to do with excitement. If somebody came to me with a commission, let's say, I think I might be able to produce an acceptable poem. So it's not a complete loss of all understanding of what a poem might be, but it's just that sense of for yourself that you're creating something with dynamism, with life, and it's just not really there at the moment. So I'm actually trying to shift genre a little bit.
Ooh.
To try and, I know, I'm going to make that error that most poets make of trying to write a novel. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. And it seems to be going okay.
Well, that's great. I mean, to me, that's like jumping in at the deep end, going to the novel, but it must be a form that you are attracted to, interested in, curious about the possibilities of.
Yeah, partly because of, you mentioned being a librettist, partly because of that. So I studied writing for opera as a PhD, and because of that I had to learn a little bit more about arcs, characters, things along these lines, and I was not especially good at it at the start. But it's just something that I feel moved by. I can spend a week getting nothing done with a novel and not consider it lost. Whereas if I spent a week getting nothing done with a poem, I think I'd be quite depressed.
Yeah, I had a similar conversation with Andrew Macmillan, who you may know, who's had a novel out, I think, last year. And he said he just felt the pressure was off because he was new to that game. Where in poetry, he felt like the external pressure, like what's he going to write next, or the sort of judgment, but also the own pressure he put on himself. For a novel, he said, well, I can forgive myself my sins here because I'm learning.
It's all discovery, and that's what it feels to me. And so if you write, or let's say I wrote a couple of thousand words and they didn't work out, I can still reflect over, why didn't they work? Because there's more particular rules to why prose might work or not work. Have you created the character right or not right? With a poem, it's all chance. It's all just seems to be lightning.
Chance and magic.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's a curious moment. Trying to write poems, certainly reading a lot of poems, but trying other things too.
I think that's really exciting. I think I never had the bravery for a novel. I read novels, like loads and loads of novels before I became a writer. But I was so busy as a teacher when I began writing that poetry was slightly a practical choice because they were short. I thought I would never have the time. And then from poetry, I've then delved into like the lyric essay because it's just a little bit longer. Then into the memoir, maybe the short story, but the novel is still one I feel like, I don't know, I might have to wait for retirement.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just one of those that I would like to say I tried and I went in all in on it. And if it fails spectacularly, then that's just the case.
I'm excited for you. I also think there's something about, I know after my own poetry collections, there's all the energy and the life and the excitement, and that's going out. And then after that, I've often found that my fallow periods involve taking things in. So I want to go and see art. I want to go to the cinema, maybe the theatre. I want to read a lot. I just want to absorb. No more outputs from me for a while.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of that is the magazine as well. Becoming the editor lined up pretty well with this new collection's, or this most recent collection's manuscript being pretty much finished. And I just thought, well, there's no better time to be able to say, right, I will just focus on other people's poetry, reading theirs, showcasing theirs or whatever else, because for a period at least, I don't feel like I need to write my own.
Yeah, right, exactly. You're kind of afloat in a sea of poems. I suspect there's probably thousands of poems coming in your direction.
30,000.
30,000.
Yeah. I tell people my job is not to accept poems or read poems. My job is to reject 29,900 poems per year. So if I get 30,000, I might accept 100 or so. So it is really as stark as that. It's just about having to be the kind of the person who says no.
Oh, that's difficult. When you put it like that with those figures, yeah, you realise that's the flip of the job, isn't it? Well, let's hear one of your poems that did make it into the world of publication, made it onto the page. You're going to read a poem called Good Night from your collection, Nocturne.
So this is the last poem in the book. And Nocturne dealt with, I was very fortunate to be able to be a stay-at-home dad for the early years with my son. And I think most people understand, you know, having a kid, you're up late at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and there's poems in here called Midnight and 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. and things along those lines. And that's wonderful. You can dedicate yourself to this small life and it's fantastic. And a lot of books prepare you for that, you know, these new parenting books. But the thing I didn't find really covered in these books was what happens when your child sleeps through the night, but biology or his life has taught you to be awake at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. again. And so for a period, I was just constantly waking up in the middle of the night with nothing to do and nothing to dedicate myself to. And so this was a little poem about that period. Good night. No curtains should be open at that time, but ours weren't drawn and the cold world looked in. 3 years into his life, come to the window, sleep hadn't found my door again. So up, I watched the morning's morning open out, the frosted ground clean as an envelope. Awake, so tenderly awake, I felt like the lamplighter of some old city when the city's lit and the crowds dispersed. So much was love, so much was work. I took the small spark post to post, I cradled it and let it guide me to my darkling house. Good morning, here's the brightness in the dawn. Good night, here's love like a faint snowfall. Good night.
Thank you. It's such a beautiful poem. I love it. It's a sonnet, and we'll talk about that form in a little bit. But it reminds me of what you just said in your introduction, that one of the sort of messages from the baby book was like, when your child naps, you must have a nap. And I remember like my son would fall asleep sometimes at 10 a.m. or, you know, lunchtime, and then I would just lie on the bed like wild-eyed, completely panicked, unable to sleep, knowing I wasn't going to sleep that night. And that sleeplessness is a kind of wildness. And I wondered, did that sleeplessness in any way affect your writing practice? I mean, obviously you wrote poems about it.
It did. It especially did at the start, where I was trying especially to keep things going. So my first book was out in April 2014, Now, my son had been born the month before,
Oh.
and so it was this sense of everything changing. The book's out, my son's born, but wanting to keep the poetry going. And so I tried a kind of practice of being conscious that he would generally wake up about 1 a.m. needing fed. And so if I could just stay up till 1, feed him, and then we both would go to bed at 2. But then I collapsed after, I'm not joking, about 6 weeks into this process, in a very unflattering way in Edinburgh. And I realised maybe that is not the course. So it just became just eking out little moments. And I think that's why there is quite a dreamy over-alertness maybe in that second collection. I think that's it. It's very much in that moment of sleeplessness and being deprived of such coziness.
Yeah, it's a very wakeful book. Okay, so let's talk about this poem in itself. It's a sonnet, and I've been reading your most recent collection as well, The Island in the Sound, and where there are these island sonnets that are sort of scattered throughout the book. So is the sonnet form an important one to you? Is it something you like to play around with?
How would I say this? Not intentionally, but if I can feel it falling into that, especially in the redraft. I mean, what I would tend to tell any writer is, especially if you've got a poem that's 16 lines, try and get it into a sonnet. Why?
I say that.
A bit pressure. Crunch that poem down. Where's it going to be weak and crumble in and become more dense in hopefully a positive way? I was looking at this poem, when you said it was a sonnet, I thought, is it? Is it? It is, but I hadn't picked up on that at all. I it's maybe so long ago since I wrote it, and again, I don't remember that period especially well. That's one of those I've blacked out long periods. I think with the more recent ones, the island sonnets you mentioned, I suppose I was playing a little bit around with the conventions of love poems, love sonnets, and dedicating it to islands or local islands. I thought was maybe a little bit of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love those poems. I think they're so beautiful. I think this poem's beautiful as well. But there is a turn in this poem where it opens up almost like expansively from the domestic into the idea of the city, the whole lamplighter. It slightly reminded me, and I wondered if you had it in mind, although it is different, is the sonnet Waking with Russell by Don Patterson. I don't know if you know that poem. There's an image in it. It's not of the man holding the light. He's talking about his son.
Yeah, that's the one with I kissed your lips and pledged myself forever. That was the
that's the one. And he says about his son something like, you lit the path as you ran.
I suppose not intentionally, but definitely echoes. I mean, I loved those poems when, what were they, in Landing Light, which was one of my favourite collections by Dawn. I remember reading those and being blown away by them. So maybe I'll mark that down to subconscious influence.
Well, it was just this idea of the child and the father, this idea of, the sort of communion or something that's been lit in them, in the father, I think, particularly, by having a child.
I think what I wanted to try and get across, I suppose, was this idea of, I think I'm a very, perhaps it's a kind of semi-Scottish take on things of love. Even love itself possesses an element of work to it.
So much is love, so much is work.
Yes, so that was it. So it was just about, this wonder, being able to carry wonder, carry light around with you, but also acknowledging at the same time, it's difficult. Whatever you might be doing as a parent or as a partner or anything else, there's that element of just saying, okay, whatever you might be feeling at the moment, just a big part of your commitment is a commitment of kind of sending over energy as much as anything else.
Yeah, essentially, it's labour. I mean, it's love and labour, and it's difficult. I mean, I think you do it so well. Just in the phrasing there, so much was love, so much was work, that sort of anaphoric repetition, it takes away from anything that could seem a little bit more... It sounds beautiful, even when it could be, not a complaint, but it is pointing out the labour that is part of love and parenting. And I love that about the poem.
Yeah, I didn't want to make it appear like any of this was particularly easy either. I mean, you do want to be honest and truthful to the situation, that your life's blown apart in the most beautiful way, but... still, everything's got its toll.
Yeah, and there's a great tenderness in your writing about fatherhood. I probably can't quote it from memory, but another poem from this collection when you talk about who is it knocking at sleep's old door or something, and it's your son, and it's such a beautiful way of writing about what many parents experience is like the complete chaos of the crying baby. You do it so gently. And how about in your imagery, Neil? I wanted to ask you that there's a lovely line there. I watched the morning's morning open out, the frosted ground, clean as an envelope. I think it's one of those, it's a simile, not a metaphor, that does the work of being both absolutely precise and quite surprising, which is what the best imagery does. Do those things in your writing process, do they land in your lap or on your page, or do you do particular work to find?
No, those were gifts. 100% of all the poem were gifts. A lot of it, I feel, as a poet, is being patient at the page. I remember I was working with a mentor, somebody was mentoring me, but with another couple of poets back in the earlier days, and we were talking about different writing practices, and a lot of people, I think, write a lot, huge amounts in spurts, and then it's about shaping and cutting down. And I was saying, I think I'm a bit more, maybe even in my speaking pattern, if you forgive me, but slowly adding and really maybe not even putting down on the page until I'm quite sure of where it's going to go. So a lot of it is just waiting at the page and considering, and this one was a bit of a gift. It just came and you just know immediately if it's right and it's going to commit to it.
Yeah, I find that's so interesting. And I just, in sort of closing up before we have a break, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your language. You write and speak English, but there's a poem at the beginning of this new collection, Tongues of Water, that is about not having the Scots, not having the language. I think you say recited in my parents' language that wasn't mine. So it's about going to a church service and the idea that Gaelic was just sound, pure sound. And I wondered if is it a loss to you not having that language?
Anytime I do a reading, especially in northern parts of Scotland, they do ask that question if I speak Gaelic. And of course I don't. I mean, when I was born in the 80s, Gaelic, and the relationship with Gaelic there was a societal change. I mean, it was the language of the farm or the fishing village. Where I grew up, I mean, mine was a fishing village. But, there's an idea of especially families, my mother and father, pushing us out of there to say, no, the world is changing, please, almost don't do this. And so it's complicated. It's really complicated. And of course I feel a loss for it. I was trying to do Duolingo. I mean, I was taught until I was 16 in school, but I've got no conversational Gaelic. So I don't understand the connotations of the Gaelic words in the way that I would understand them in English. So
yeah, that makes perfect sense. So your experiences of Gaelic remind me of my experiences in French, which I did at school till I was 16. Yes. And I could definitely ask for a hotel room with a shower, but everything else is gone. Well, that brings us to a good time to take a break. Please join us after the break when I'll be talking to Neil about a poem that inspires him.
We hope you're enjoying this season of The Glimpse. It's just one small part of the Adrian Brinkerhoff Poetry Foundation.
We're the founders, Peter
and Kathy Halstead. Our goal is to make great poetry more accessible to everyone, and we do that in a variety of ways, through partnerships, our film series, this podcast, and our website, brinkerhoffpoetry.org.
We hope these works will lure you into a parallel universe, the way a Mobius strip brings you into another dimension without leaving the page you're on.
Thank you so much for listening.
Welcome back to The Glimpse. I'm joined today by Niall Campbell. Neil, please feel free to introduce, or you can just read the poem that you've chosen for today's episode that inspires you.
So I will introduce it just slightly. So this is a poet called Deborah Digges, or Deborah Digges. She's relatively new to me, but I'll tell you my experience in terms of finding her. It's one of those, I hope like most poets, other people have little WhatsApp groups where if they come across something spectacular, they have to share with somebody else. And it was this poem called The Birthing that a friend shared, and I immediately knew that, one, I love the poem, but that I had to search out everything else this person had ever done. And I just, head over heels, she's written a couple of memoirs, and so I read those as well, and I just found it spectacular for reasons I can go into. It's called The Birthing. Call out the names in the procession of the loved. Call from the blood the ancestors here to bear witness to the day he stopped the car. We on our way to a great banquet in his honour. In a field, a cow groaned, lowing, trying to give birth, what he called front leg presentation. The calf came out, nose first, one front leg dangling from his mother. A fetal sign, he said, while rolling up the sleeves of his dress shirt, and climbed the fence. I watched him thrust his arms entire into the yet-to-be, where I imagined holy sparrows scattering in the hall of souls for his big mortal hands just to make way. With his whole weight, he pushed the calf back in the mother and grasped the other leg, tucked up like a closed wing against the new one's shoulder, and found a way in the warm dark to bring both legs out into the world together. Then heaved and pulled, the cow arching her back, until a bull calf in a whoosh of blood and water came falling whole and still onto the meadow. We rubbed his blackness, bloodying our hands. The mother licked her newborn, of us oblivious, until it moved a little, struggled. I ran to get our coats, mine a green velvet cloak and his tuxedo jacket, and worked to rub the new one dry while he set out to find the farmer. When it was over, the new calf suckling his mother, the farmer soon to lead them to the barn, leaving our coats just where they lay, we huddled in the car, and then made love towards eternity, without a word drove slowly home, and loved some more.
Thank you. This is such an amazing poem. Tell us, what is it about this poem for you?
I think what she does so beautifully, even just in the opening, is to catch the reader off guard. And it's something she does throughout. She starts very high and very grand, call out the names in the procession of the loved, and you think, oh, right, it's going to be quite arched, quite high. And call from the blood the ancestors here to be your witness to the day he stopped the car. And essentially, if I would describe it to somebody, I would say it would be kind of like the movements of a bird. It flies and then comes back down to earth. It flies again, it soars, and then it comes back down. And it tries and succeeds, I think, in belonging to two worlds. It's the transcendent moments, the up and the lifted, and then it's still right down there, you know, the calf, the bloodied shirts or jackets. And I just find that wondrous. I just think it's the perfect way to write.
Yeah, it's such a bold opening. I've written my notes on the poem, I've written sort of this elevation and then this dropping down into the field. And what's so interesting to me in this poem is that they're on their way. I mean, I think she's writing about her husband who was a very well-known, maybe he was like president of the veterinary society or something. They're on the way to this banquet where he's going to be honoured. They're on our way to a great banquet in his honour. And she never uses his name or says my husband. He's the he. I found that so interesting.
So again, it's a lovely thing about being close enough as a reader, but general enough to allow most shapes to occupy that position. You know, it's kind of, again, a classic thing with a poem. You want there to be enough space. Well, first of all, you want enough detail that it's there and present, but you want enough space for the reader to inhabit. You know, and it's not her husband, it's not possessive, it's not mine, it's just he. And that could be anyone. You know, it's just this, I think so many right decisions made throughout.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Do you think, I was wondering, like, if the poem is partly about the sort of, I don't know if folly is the right word, but the sort of folly of human life with its tuxedos and its award ceremonies. But the great banquet really goes on in the field, like with the birth of the cow.
Yeah, that's a lovely reading. I think there's that definite sense of, you know, but what other way could you honour or be honoured? You know, that you don't need to attend this banquet at the end. You know, as you say, this is life, and this is a moment, and they love and then return. They don't go onwards. I mean, what is magical, or maybe what cements our love, is that he stops the car. You know, he doesn't go on. He sees something, and even at a moment when he should be thinking about himself, the car stops and he goes off to do something else. And I think, again, it just speaks to, you know, what are these things that we love about another person? You know, they're these wild moments that you might get invited to, you know, dinners or receptions or any success that they might have. But it's just the fact that they are the type of person who stop when they don't need to stop.
Yeah.
Or kind of push on like that.
Yeah, and not only stops, but then they ruin their clothes. Yeah. She takes her green velvet cape, he takes his tuxedo, they clean the new bull calf, and then, they don't make it to the banquet. So the love that's expressed at the end, which is both physical and I think there's in the poem, in the white space of the poem, is her great love for him, is made in the shadow of death or the risk of death. That's what I felt, you know, something tragic, a tragedy could have happened in the field.
I think that's this whole book. I mean, so this book, was our last, published posthumously, The Wind Blows Through the Doors of My Heart. So death was and is looming through this whole collection, you know, quite a tragic life. There's actually a YouTube reading of her last reading, I presume, just can't remember if it was days or weeks before she died, and it's just electric. You know, there's somebody who is suffering through something quite great, and it just seems like death and life were really overlapping, both in her own life and translated to the poems as well.
Yeah, I read about her biography as well. It reminds me of another poet that died quite tragically, who I decided to read everything of, another American poet called Linda Hull. And so the sort of, it's interesting, isn't it, in terms of our own knowledge in the UK of, like, we know the big lodestar American poets, and sometimes we don't know about these other poets. And when I looked up Deborah Digges, she was quite prolific. I mean, there's quite a large body of work. Yeah,
as I say, there's memoirs, there's collections, and I mean, and I think this is why, you know, again, you know, my own obsessions of why, again, you might just desire to kind of put her name a bit more out there, just because it's somebody, like, with the magazines or editing Poetry London, we did small features where I asked poets to take a collection that they love, that they think has been undervalued or underappreciated or gone without as much notice as it was due, and sing the praises of it. And I think especially at a moment where publishing poetry, but novels, you know, most genres of art, is on an annual cycle where it's year by year, what awards might you be eligible for, and as soon as it's out with the award category or award period, it's yesterday's book. Can we just slow everything down? I mean, when I was, what first attracted me to poetry was, you know, I did read a lot of novels when I was in my 20s, but it was always a sense that you would read a novel and then you'd put it in the charity shop. With poetry, it was different. Poetry was again and again and again and returning. And what are you looking for in poetry but the 4 or 5 books that might kind of last you your entire life?
Oh, I feel exactly the same. Yeah, I feel totally the same. And in a way, I sometimes think I don't read enough of the kind of the contemporary, the new, the year by year, the 2026 collections, the 2025 collection. I'm always going back to the same poets again and again. And then I find a poet like this, which has come through you, which is so nice for me. And I think, I'm going to get lost in her writing as well, because there's clearly like a very masterful voice here. And even the title of that collection, is it The Wind Blows Through the Doors of My Heart? Just makes me think, I want to read her. I read somewhere a couple of things that you said about, one was that you kind of get obsessed with a writer for a while, and then that obsession passes. Is that still your habit now?
100%. I mean, partly this is, I think, just the nature of, again, where we are in terms of publishing as much as in terms of reading, because there's so many books being written. I mean, for the Eliots, it was actually fewer than I expected, but we still had to read about 170 collections that were published in the 12-month period, eligible. But it's still 170 collections, probably more being published, 200, 300. And so it's quite hard. And so when I do find somebody that chimes with me or chimes with my sensibility, and I read their one book, I try and find everything. Mm-hmm. I would say as well as when it comes to prizes or recognition, I would always just say, again, this is why when would you want this to happen? Probably in your 4th or 5th or even your 6th book. It's terrific to be the debut that hits big, but almost better to be the 6th book that hits big. So then you've got a back catalogue that can, hopefully find some new audience as well,
Yeah, that's so true. I hadn't ever thought of it like that, but you're right. And very much like you, I sometimes think I fall into like the deep trench of someone's work, and I can be there for quite a long time, but it's trench knowledge, So I thank you, Niall, for bringing this poem to me, and I'm looking forward to discovering more about Deborah Digges or Digges' work. Before we finish today's episode, we talked a little bit at the beginning about your novel that you're working on. Is there anything else on I mean, that sounds actually quite a lot to be on your plate.
I've got a new short opera, The Language of Eden, with the Scottish Chamber Orchestra. That's the next kind of big thing.
This isn't your first opera then to be produced?
The second. It's been a fascinating experience, if only because I went into it thinking to overturn history, where often, I mean, the argument of my thesis was that the libretto is the underappreciated art. It's a thing that is very difficult to study because you're trying to look at it outside or away from the music. But I've fallen back into kind of siding with Auden. So W.H. Auden wrote an opera with Stravinsky called The Rake's Progress, and he wrote essays about his feelings, how he should go about it. And he said the libretto is a private letter to the composer. Oh. So the job of the librettist is not to aim for the audience, is only to inspire the composer. You've got to inspire them into music, into this overflow of feelings, and they aim towards the audience. Because you can have the best libretto in the world, and if the music isn't right, it's a total flop. You could have an absolute garbage, terrible libretto, I'm sorry, but the magic flute, and but the music is so wonderful that it lasts and lasts and lasts. So your main job, or your primary or only job, is to aim for the composer, inspire them, speak to them, have a relationship with them, and hopefully you can help them create their best.
Yeah, and in that sense, it's a real collaboration, isn't it? Which is wonderful and quite different from the work we do as poets. Well, I'm going to look out for that, Niall. It's great to hear about it. So thank you very much for joining me today on The Glimpse.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Hannah Lowe. Niall's poem, Good Night from Nocturne, was published by Blood Axe Books in 2019 and is used with their permission. The Birthing by Deborah Digges is from The Wind Blows Through the Doors of My Heart, courtesy of Alfred A. Knopf. And that's it for the 3rd season of The Glimpse. It's been a pleasure to be in conversation with these writers and their words, and to share those conversations with you. I hope you'll keep it going Keep reading poems and join us for the next season of The Glimpse. Make sure to subscribe to The Glimpse wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find episodes on our website, brinkerhoffpoetry.org/podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. Drop us an email at theglimpsepoetrypodcast@gmail.com. The Glimpse is a production of the Adrian Brinkerhoff Poetry Foundation. I'm your host, Hannah Lowe. Our senior producer is Jennifer Wolfe. Kat Yore is our technical director and mixing engineer. Editorial director Amanda Glassman is our curator and production coordinator. Amy Holmes is the Foundation's executive director. And our co-founders are Kathy and Peter Halstead. Thanks for listening.